The morning started like any other Tuesday in what my son David and his wife Amanda believed was their beautiful suburban home. I sat at the kitchen table, slowly stirring my coffee with shaking hands, watching Amanda rush around in her designer workout clothes, preparing for another day of what she called managing our household. "Margaret, you left your walker blocking the hallway again," Amanda snapped, not even looking at me as she grabbed her yoga mat. I nearly tripped over that thing rushing to answer an important call from my personal trainer. I apologized quietly, the way I always did. At 72, with arthritis making every step painful, I depended on that walker more than I cared to admit. But Amanda saw it as just another inconvenience in what she considered her perfectly curated life. David emerged from upstairs, already dressed in the expensive suits I'd been secretly funding for the past 3 years. He kissed Amanda's cheek and barely glanced my way. "Mom, remember Amanda has her book club tonight, so you'll need to manage dinner yourself." "Of course, sweetheart," I said, hiding the irony in my voice. Manage dinner in the house I actually owned, with money from accounts they didn't even know existed. The truth was, I'd been living this carefully constructed lie for almost 4 years now, ever since my husband Robert passed away. While everyone assumed his death left me financially vulnerable, Robert had actually been the front for a business empire I'd built from scratch. Riverside Property Management wasn't just a small company, it was a multi-million-dollar operation with over 200 rental properties, including the very house David and Amanda thought they owned. After Robert's funeral, when David suggested I move in with them temporarily, I saw it as an opportunity to observe their true characters. I wanted to see if the son I'd raised with love and values would protect his mother, or if the wealth I'd secretly provided had corrupted him beyond recognition. The answer became clear within weeks. Amanda treated me like hired help, making demands and rolling her eyes when I moved too slowly. David had become a stranger, more interested in his wife's approval than his mother's welfare. They discussed my burden openly, assuming my hearing was failing along with everything else. But my hearing was perfect. And so was my memory of every cruel comment, every eye roll, every deliberate exclusion from family gatherings they hosted in my own dining room. What they didn't know was that their entire lifestyle, the mortgage payments, credit cards, car loans, even Amanda's precious spa memberships, all flowed through accounts I controlled. I'd set up a complex trust system that allowed me to support them while maintaining complete control. They thought David's promotion at his marketing firm had suddenly made him successful. In reality, I'd been paying his salary through consulting contracts my company held with his employer. The most delicious irony was watching Amanda flaunt purchases made on credit cards I ultimately funded, while she complained about the financial drain of caring for poor, elderly Margaret. This morning felt different, though. I could see the tension building in Amanda's face, the way she slammed cabinets and muttered under her breath about ungrateful people and lifestyle adjustments. I'd been experiencing more pain lately, my arthritis flaring up with the changing weather. The walker had become essential, especially navigating the stairs in this 2-story house. But I'd noticed Amanda's increasing irritation every time she saw it, as if my medical needs were a personal attack on her aesthetically pleasing environment. "Margaret, we need to talk," Amanda announced, returning from the garage with a determined expression. David looked up from his phone, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "What is it, honey?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew this conversation wouldn't be pleasant for me. Amanda crossed her arms, positioning herself like a prosecutor about to deliver closing arguments. "I've been patient, really patient, but this situation isn't working anymore. You're 72 years old, Margaret. You can barely walk, you're constantly in the way, and frankly, David and I are young and deserve to enjoy our home without constantly worrying about whether you're going to fall down the stairs." I kept my expression neutral, sipping my coffee as if this was a discussion about the weather rather than my basic right to mobility and dignity. "What are you suggesting?" I asked calmly. "There are facilities, good ones, where you can get proper care," Amanda continued, her voice taking on that artificially sweet tone she used when she wanted to seem reasonable. "David's been researching options, haven't you, honey?" David nodded eagerly, clearly relieved that Amanda was handling this conversation. "There's a place called Sunset Manor about 30 minutes away. They have physical therapy, meal programs, social activities." "What David means," Amanda interrupted, "is that you'd be much happier somewhere designed for people with your limitations. and would be able to focus on building our family without constantly managing your medical needs. The word limitations hung in the air like a slap. I wondered if they'd practiced this speech, or if Amanda's cruelty was just naturally this polished. I see, I said quietly. And how exactly would I afford this facility? Amanda and David exchanged a look that made my stomach turn. I recognized that look. It was the same expression they wore when discussing major purchases they assumed I couldn't afford. Well, that's the thing, Amanda said, her fake sweetness turning slightly sharp. David spoke with a financial advisor. If we sell this house and downsize to something smaller, there should be enough equity to cover your care for several years. It's really the most practical solution for everyone. They wanted to sell my house to pay for locking me away. The audacity was breathtaking, even after 4 years of witnessing their selfishness. Of course, we'd make sure you're comfortable, David added quickly, though he couldn't meet my eyes. It's just that Amanda and I are planning for our future, maybe starting a family, and this house is really perfect for young professionals like us. Young professionals. I almost laughed. David's entire career was funded by my business contracts, and Amanda hadn't worked a real job since their wedding 3 years ago. I understand, I said, standing slowly and reaching for my walker. This is a lot to think about. That's when Amanda's mask finally slipped completely. Actually, Margaret, there's something else we need to discuss, Amanda said, and I could hear the edge in her voice that meant she was done pretending to be nice. This whole walker situation has got to stop. I paused, my hand still gripping the walker's handle. I'm sorry. Look at this place. Amanda gestured around the kitchen with obvious disgust. I can't have friends over because there's medical equipment cluttering up every room. The walker by the front door, prescription bottles on the counter, those ugly grab bars David installed in the hallway bathroom. It looks like a nursing home, not a modern family home. David shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. I watched my son, the boy I'd raised to stand up for people who couldn't defend themselves, and waited for him to speak up for his mother. The silence stretched until Amanda filled it with more venom. And another thing, I'm tired of adjusting my schedule around your medical appointments. Yesterday I had to cancel lunch with my friends because you needed a ride to physical therapy. I'm 28 years old, Margaret. I shouldn't have to spend my prime years playing nurse to someone who should be in professional care. The cruelty was stunning, but not surprising. What shocked me was David's response when I looked to him for support. Mom, you have to understand Amanda's perspective, he said, still avoiding eye contact. We're at a stage in our lives where we need flexibility, spontaneity. Having to constantly worry about whether you can manage the stairs, or if your medication is making you dizzy, it's a lot of stress for a young couple. Stress, I repeated slowly. Taking care of your mother is stress. Well, yeah, Amanda jumped in, emboldened by David's support. Look, I didn't sign up to be a caregiver when I married David. I thought I was marrying into a normal family, not inheriting a dependent elderly person who needs constant supervision. She was just getting started. And honestly, Margaret, some of this feels a little performative. Like you're exaggerating how much help you actually need because you're scared of being independent again. My grandmother was 85 and still driving, still living alone. You're only 72 and acting like you're completely helpless. The accusation that I was faking my disability hit like a physical blow. I'd been hiding the true extent of my arthritis pain for months, not wanting to burden them further. Some mornings I could barely get out of bed, but I'd force myself up and dressed before they woke up, maintaining the illusion that I was managing better than I actually was. Amanda, that's not fair, I said quietly. Isn't it? She shot back. Because I've been watching, Margaret. You move just fine when you think no one's looking. But the moment David or I are around, suddenly you need help with everything. It's manipulative, and frankly, it's getting old. David nodded along, apparently convinced by his wife's amateur medical diagnosis. Mom, maybe Amanda has a point. Remember how active you used to be. Maybe if you pushed yourself a little more instead of relying on the walker for every little thing. I felt something break inside my chest. Not my heart, that had been cracking for months. This was different. This was the final destruction of any illusion I'd maintained about my son's character. So what exactly are you suggesting? I asked. Amanda's eyes lit up with the anticipation of someone about to win an argument. I think you should try going without the walker for a week. Just to see if you actually need it, or if it's become a psychological crutch. And if I fall? Then we'll know it's really necessary, David said, as if he was being reasonable. But Amanda might be right, Mom. Maybe you've become too dependent on it. I stared at my son, this man who looked like the boy I'd raised but spoke like a stranger. David, you were there when the doctor explained my arthritis progression. You heard him say the walker prevents falls that could result in serious fractures. Doctors are overly cautious these days, Amanda waved dismissively. They want everyone dependent on medical equipment because it's profitable. My yoga instructor says most mobility issues in older people are really just fear-based limitations. Her yoga instructor. I was receiving medical advice filtered through Amanda's yoga instructor. Look, Margaret, Amanda continued, clearly enjoying her role as household authority. David and I have been talking, and we think you've gotten too comfortable letting us take care of everything. It's not healthy for you, and it's not fair to us. You need to start taking more responsibility for your own independence. The irony was astronomical. She was lecturing me about independence while living in my house, driving cars I'd financed, wearing clothes purchased with my money, all while planning to sell my property to fund my imprisonment. But this next part, this was where Amanda revealed the true depth of her cruelty. So here's what's going to happen, she announced, walking over to where my walker stood beside the kitchen table. We're going to help you break this dependency once and for all. And then she picked up my walker, my medically necessary mobility aid, and carried it straight to the garbage can by the back door. Amanda, what are you doing? I asked, though I already knew. Helping you, she said, opening the large outdoor trash bin and shoving my walker inside among the coffee grounds and food scraps. Walk or crawl, we're not your servants anymore. If you really need help getting around, you'll figure it out. But I'm done having my beautiful home turned into a medical facility for someone who's probably perfectly capable of walking on her own. She slammed the trash bin lid shut with a satisfying bang, then turned back to me with a triumphant smile. I looked at David, waiting for him to retrieve my walker, to tell his wife she'd crossed a line, to show even a flicker of the man I'd raised. Instead, he nodded approvingly. It's tough love, Mom, but Amanda's right. You're stronger than you think. I sat there for a moment, processing what had just happened. My daughter-in-law had literally thrown my mobility aid in the trash, my son had endorsed it, and they both seemed to believe this was therapeutic rather than abusive. I see, I said calmly, reaching for my phone. Well, if you'll excuse me, I need to make a phone call. Mom, you don't need to call the doctor, David said quickly. Just try walking without it first. Oh, I'm not calling the doctor, I said, scrolling through my contacts with steady fingers. I'm calling my accountant. Amanda laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. Your accountant? Margaret, what are you talking about? You don't have an accountant. I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. Actually, Amanda, I have several. And I think it's time we had a conversation about who really owns what in this house. I hit the call button and watched their faces change as a professional voice answered on the second ring. Good morning, Margaret. How can I help you today? Good morning, Thomas. I need you to pull the mortgage information for 142 Maple Street, the property registration documents, and the credit account statements for David Patterson and Amanda Patterson. Also, please prepare the eviction notices we discussed last month. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Certainly, Margaret. Should I also prepare the asset seizure paperwork for the vehicles and credit accounts? Yes, please. And Thomas? They just threw my walker in the garbage and told me to crawl. I think it's time they learned exactly who's been funding their lifestyle. Amanda's face had gone completely white. David was staring at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. I'll have everything ready within the hour, Margaret. Should I also contact the sheriff's department for the eviction enforcement? Not yet, Thomas. Let's give them a chance to process this information first. But yes, please have the paperwork ready. I ended the call and set my phone on the table, looking at my son and daughter-in-law with new eyes. Not the eyes of a helpless elderly woman dependent on their charity, but the eyes of a successful businesswoman who'd been documenting their abuse for 4 years. Now then, I said pleasantly, I believe we were discussing my living arrangements. David found his voice first, though it came out as barely a whisper. Mom, what was that phone call about? That, I said, settling back in my chair with the confidence of someone who'd just played their winning hand, was about reality. Something you two seem to have lost touch with. Amanda was still staring at the phone as if it might bite her. Margaret, what did you mean about mortgage information? This is David's house. We bought this house 3 years ago with our savings. Did you? I asked pleasantly. That's interesting, because I have the actual purchase documents right upstairs. Would you like me to get them? Mom, you're confused, David said quickly, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. We got the loan through First National Bank. I remember signing all the paperwork. Oh, you signed paperwork, all right. But David, sweetheart, did you ever actually read what you were signing? The truth was delicious to reveal, layer by layer. For 3 years, I'd watched them live in my house, believing it was theirs because they'd made what they thought were mortgage payments. In reality, those payments had gone into an account I controlled, and the house had been purchased outright by Riverside Property Management, my company, before being sold to them through a complex arrangement of loans and trusts. The house is owned by Riverside Property Management, I explained, watching their faces carefully. A company I founded 25 years ago and have owned outright since your father's death. You've been paying rent, not a mortgage, though the payments were structured to look like mortgage installments. That's impossible, Amanda said, but her voice was shaking. We have a mortgage statement. We get bills every month. You get bills from a property management company that I own. Bills for the privilege of living in one of my rental properties. David was rifling through his memory, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. But the bank, the loan officer, works for a financial services company that contracts with Riverside Property Management. David, you never actually qualified for a mortgage large enough to buy this house. Your salary, even with the raises you think you've earned through merit, wouldn't support a loan this size. That's when I saw the first flicker of understanding cross David's face. What do you mean, the raises I think I've earned? I mean that your employer, Morrison Marketing, has had an exclusive consulting contract with Riverside Property Management for the past 4 years. A contract that specifically requires them to employ one David Patterson at a salary of $85,000 annually, with performance bonuses that bring your total compensation to 6 figures. The color drained from David's face. You've been paying my salary? Indirectly, yes. Your raises, your bonuses, your merit-based promotions, all funded through consulting fees my company pays to Morrison Marketing, with the specific requirement that you remain employed at a certain salary level. Amanda sank into a chair, finally understanding the magnitude of what they were facing. How much? She whispered. How much of our life have you been controlling? I smiled, the same calm smile I'd worn while enduring their abuse. Well, let's see. The house, obviously. Your car payments. Both cars are financed through loans I guaranteed, and the payments come out of accounts I fund. Your credit cards, which I believe currently carry a balance of about $4,000 to $7,000 between the two of you, are ultimately backed by my credit and paid from my accounts. This is crazy, Amanda said, though she was sounding less certain by the minute. People don't just secretly own other people's lives. People with sufficient financial resources and legal knowledge do exactly that, Amanda. Especially when they want to observe whether their family members are worthy of their generosity. David was starting to put the pieces together, and I could see the panic building in his eyes. Mom, if this is all true, then you've been living entirely on my charity while treating me like a burden. Yes, David. That's exactly what's been happening. I pulled out my phone again and opened the banking app that showed real-time account information. Would you like to see your current actual financial position? Before they could answer, I turned the screen toward them. The color that had drained from their faces somehow managed to drain further. Your checking account has a balance of $312. Your savings account has $87. Your credit cards are maxed out at $4,000 to $7,000 in combined debt. You have no assets, not the house, not the cars, not even the furniture, which was purchased through a rent-to-own program that I guarantee. But our statements. David protested weakly. Show account balances maintained by automatic transfers from my business accounts. David, you've never actually seen your real financial position because I've been managing everything behind the scenes. Amanda was starting to hyperventilate. You've been spying on us. This is financial abuse. The irony of her using that term was almost too perfect. Amanda, sweetheart, financial abuse is when someone steals money or controls another person's access to their own resources. What I've been doing is the opposite. I've been secretly providing resources while you've been abusing the person funding your lifestyle. That's when my phone rang. Thomas, my accountant, calling back as promised. Excuse me, I said politely, answering the call. Yes, Thomas. Margaret, I have the documents ready. The eviction notice for 142 Maple Street can be served immediately if needed. I've also prepared the asset seizure orders for both vehicles and the credit account freeze orders. Should I proceed? Actually, Thomas, let me call you back in a few minutes. I think David and Amanda might want to discuss their situation before we take any legal action. I ended the call and looked at my son and daughter-in-law, who were staring at me as if they'd never seen me before. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm but carrying the authority I'd used to build a multi-million-dollar business. You have a choice. You can acknowledge what you've done, make genuine efforts to change your behavior, and earn your way back into my life as family members who treat me with respect. Or you can continue being the people you've shown me you are, in which case you'll need to find somewhere else to live and some way to support yourselves that doesn't involve my money. Mom, please, David said, and for the first time in years, he sounded like my son instead of Amanda's husband. We didn't know. If we had known. David, did you think it was acceptable to let your wife throw your disabled mother's walker in the trash because you didn't know I was wealthy? Does my financial status really determine whether I deserve basic human dignity? He had no answer for that, because we all knew the truth. They treated me horribly because they thought I was powerless, and they were only sorry now because they'd learned I wasn't. And Amanda, I continued, you called me manipulative for using a medically necessary mobility aid. But what would you call living for 3 years off someone's money while plotting to steal their house and lock them in a nursing home? Amanda was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone who'd been caught and was facing consequences. We can work this out, she said desperately. We're family. Family forgives each other. Family, I repeated thoughtfully. Yes, let's talk about family. Family members don't throw each other's medical equipment in the trash. Family members don't call each other burdens or mock each other's disabilities. Family members don't plot to steal each other's homes to fund imprisonment. I stood up slowly, deliberately not reaching for the walker they'd thrown away, and walked carefully to the back door. My arthritis screamed with every step, but I was determined to retrieve my mobility aid under my own power. Where are you going? Amanda called out, panic clear in her voice. To get my walker out of your trash can. And then I'm going upstairs to pack my things. You're leaving? David asked, and I heard something that might have been genuine distress in his voice. Oh no, David. I'm not leaving. You are. I opened the trash bin and pulled out my walker, brushing off the coffee grounds and food scraps. The metal was sticky and smelled terrible, but it was mine, and I needed it. This house belongs to me. The cars belong to me. The credit cards that paid for Amanda's spa treatments and your expensive dinners belong to me. I've been letting you live here because I hoped you'd eventually remember how to be decent human beings. But throwing my walker in the trash while telling me to crawl? That was the final test, and you both failed spectacularly. I walked back inside, using my rescued walker, and saw that they hadn't moved from their seats. They looked shell-shocked, still processing the complete reversal of power in their household. I'm going to give you 24 hours to find somewhere else to live, I said. Thomas will be here tomorrow at noon with the eviction paperwork and sheriff's deputies if necessary. You can take your personal belongings, clothes, photos, items with genuine sentimental value. Everything else stays here, since it was purchased with my money. Mom, please, you can't just throw us out, David pleaded. Where will we go? How will we survive? The same way millions of people survive, David. You'll get jobs that actually pay your salary instead of depending on your mother's secret charity. You'll find an apartment you can actually afford instead of living in a house that's far beyond your means. You'll learn to budget and live within your actual income instead of spending money you never earned. But our credit is destroyed because of the debt, Amanda protested. Your credit is destroyed because you spent $4,000 to $7,000 on luxuries while contributing nothing to household expenses. That debt, by the way, is about to become your responsibility alone. I'm removing my guarantee tomorrow morning. The next few hours were a masterclass in watching people's true characters emerge under pressure. David tried bargaining, pleading, even suggesting therapy to work through our family issues. Amanda alternated between rage and manipulation, first screaming about the unfairness of the situation, then trying to convince me that throwing my walker away had been tough love designed to help me. But I'd made my decision years ago, really. I'd been giving them every opportunity to show me they were worth my love and financial support. Instead, they'd shown me exactly who they were when they thought I was powerless. By evening, word had somehow gotten out in their social circle that David and Amanda were facing financial difficulties. I watched from my bedroom window as friends arrived to collect borrowed items, as neighbors whispered in driveways, as their perfect suburban life dissolved into reality. The next morning, Thomas arrived with the paperwork and 2 sheriff's deputies, just as promised. David and Amanda had spent the night packing and making frantic phone calls to friends and family, trying to find someone willing to take them in. One of the deputies said to me, "We're here to oversee the eviction of David Patterson and Amanda Patterson from this property. Are you Margaret Winters, the property owner?" "I am," I said, standing in my own front door with my walker, finally claiming my space openly. "Mom, please," David said one last time as he loaded suitcases into a friend's car. "Don't do this. We're sorry. We'll change." I looked at my son, this man I'd raised and loved and secretly supported for 34 years, and felt nothing but sadness for what he'd chosen to become. "David, you're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you're facing consequences. But you're not sorry you threw your disabled mother's walker in the trash and told her to crawl. There's a difference." And there was. In that moment, watching him beg for another chance he didn't deserve, I realized that the greatest gift I could give him was the opportunity to learn who he really was when he couldn't depend on my money to solve his problems. Amanda didn't even say goodbye. She loaded her designer clothes and expensive handbags, all purchased with my money, and left without a word. But David paused at the car, looking back at the house he'd thought was his. "Will you ever forgive us?" he asked. "I already have," I said truthfully. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen. If you want a relationship with me in the future, you'll have to earn it the same way you'll have to earn everything else from now on." 3 months later, I got a card in the mail. David had found a job, a real one, with a salary that reflected his actual qualifications. He and Amanda had separated. Apparently their love couldn't survive the stress of actual financial responsibility. He was living in a studio apartment and learning to budget for the first time in his adult life. The card was simple: "Thank you for teaching me who I really am. I'm sorry it took losing everything to learn it. I hope someday I can earn the right to be your son again." I kept the card, but I didn't rush to respond. Some lessons take time to stick, and some changes need to be proven over years, not months. Meanwhile, I bought myself a new walker, a beautiful blue one with a comfortable seat and a basket for my books. I had my kitchen renovated to be more accessible, and I hired a wonderful housekeeper named Maria who treats me with the respect I should have demanded all along. The house is peaceful now. I wake up each morning without wondering what new cruelty awaits me downstairs. I take my medication without someone suggesting I'm faking my symptoms. I move through my own home at my own pace, using whatever mobility aids I need, without apology or justification. And sometimes, when I'm sitting in my garden with my coffee and my walker beside me, I think about the look on Amanda's face when she realized that the burden she'd been abusing was actually the person funding her entire lifestyle. It was worth every penny of the fortune they never knew I had.